Hi, everyone. I'm Maven Will, and today we're doing a deep dive into the approval pattern and how to implement it in the Power Platform. If you haven't seen my introduction to the 9 Power Platform design patterns, here's a quick recap. The approval pattern provides a structured way for users to submit requests, which the system then automatically routes to one or more stakeholders for their decisions. Imagine an enterprise scenario, a purchase order request submitted by an employee. Depending on the order amount, it may need sign off from the branch manager, the regional director, or even an executive officer before it goes out. The approval pattern makes it super easy to automate this workflow, and it also creates an audit trail you can review later. Ready to learn how to build this powerful process yourself? Stick around, let's get started. Before we dive into the technical steps, I want to remind you that this video builds on the foundational skills you can gain from Microsoft's Power Up program. If you're brand new to Power Platform or you're looking to master low-code development, Power Up is your go-to learning path. It's packed with guided modules, hands-on labs, and real-world projects, everything you need to make amazing and useful Power Apps. Now, assuming that you already have a solid foundation of Power Platform development, let's start by creating a new solution. If you haven't done it already, go to makethatpowerapps.com and sign in. In the left-hand navigation, select Solutions. Then click New Solution in the command bar. This should bring up a form for you to enter a few pieces of information on your solution. I'm going to call my solution Approval Process App. You can name yours whatever you like. Now select a publisher. It's best practice to create your own publisher before making an app so you can keep your solutions organized later on. Click Create. Great. Now that we have our solution, let's dive into the data model we need for this project. Here's a rough layout of how your data structure for an approval workflow might look in Dataverse. First, you need an approval process table. This is where you define each workflow variant, your thresholds, regions, levels, and any other routing rules. You'll link this table to Dataverse's built-in system user table so you can assign approvers at each step. Next, you'll need an approval request table. This stores every submission, the request amount, region, requester, date, and any other criteria you use to pick the right approval process. When a record lands here, your flow reads its values and determines which approval process applies. Finally, there's the approval step table. Each record represents one stage in a request journey. Who needs to approve, who already has, status, comments, timestamps, and so on. These steps link back to both the parent approval process and the specific approval request, and each step points to the system user assigned to act. In a real-world implementation, you might extend this structure if you want to include other capabilities in your approvals workflow. But this core 3-table structure gives you the solid foundation you need for almost any multi-step conditional approval workflow. I'm just going to drag these tables into my solution so you don't need to watch me type. Feel free to pause the video and create your own Dataverse tables. If you get stuck or you're not sure how to set up the Dataverse tables as described here, drop your questions in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. We're also going to set up the default view and configure the main form. Then wrap it all up in a model-driven app so your admins can manage processes behind the scenes. In your solution, just click on Approval Process in the left menu. Switch over to Views, open the Active Approval Processes view, pick the columns you want to show, then hit Save and Publish. After that, jump back to Forms, open the main form, and drag in the fields you need to capture your criteria. Think minimum and maximum amounts, region, level, that kind of thing. Once your form is just right, save and publish again. Don't worry, you won't have to sit through me dragging fields around. I've already done it for you. Next, head back to the Solutions command bar and choose Apps, New App, Model-Driven App. Give your app a name, click Done, and when the App Designer opens, use the Pages menu to add a Dataverse table. Pick Approval Process, click Add, then save and publish the app. Go ahead and pause the video now to enter some dummy approval process records. You'll need these later when we dynamically spin up approval steps for each new request. Let's now move on to setting up the Canvas app. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to use a 3-pane layout similar to the one shown in the demo. There are many ways to set this up, but the best tool I found to quickly create a grid layout in the Canvas app is the flexible container. Simply insert a horizontal container, add 3 containers underneath, add some layout gap, and voila, a 3-pane layout ready to go. Next, drop in a gallery on the left and point its items property at your approval request table. In the gallery template, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to use the same icon on all requests. You can, of course, use a switch statement to dynamically change icons depending on the request type. I'll also add the request name as the title and the request status as the subtitle. Let's add a text label as the section title too. We'll leave the buttons alone for now and come back to them once the other components are set up. In the middle of the screen, add an EditForm and set its data source to approval request and its item to the gallery's selected item. I'm going to use a 2-column layout for this form. Now let's edit the fields. I feel like the request name, the amount, the request type, region, business unit, and comments are exactly what we need. I'll also add a submit button at the bottom. Now comes the fun part. Let's give the button some behaviors. Let's start with the select button. But before we begin, I want to explain the concept of form mode. When using the form component in Power Apps, we can set the form mode to view, edit, or new. This determines whether your form is read-only, editing an existing record, or creating a new record. By default, a form is set to form mode.edit, but you can change it to suit your needs with the PowerFX formula. Click on the select button in the gallery item and add the edit form command. Replace the form name inside the parentheses with your form's name. Next, let's add a button beside the section title. I'm going to set this button to display an icon only, a plus icon to represent a new request. Here, I'll use the NewForm expression. Now, when I select a record from the gallery, the form switches to Edit Form, and when I want to create a new request, the form mode changes to NewForm. Finally, for the Submit button, we'll use the SubmitForm function to write data back to the Dataverse table. We also need to generate an approval process when the form submits data to the approval request table, so let's switch over to Power Automate. Here's a high-concept view of what we need to do in Power Automate. When the user submits the approval request form in Power Apps, we want to trigger a flow that finds the right sequence of approval steps and adds them to the request. If someone edits the underlying approval process later, the flow needs to compare the correct steps with the request's current steps and fix any discrepancies. And every time the process is submitted, changed, or a level is approved, we'll send the request on to the next approver automatically. So let's dive into building the first part of that engine, the flow that generates and reconciles the approval steps for each request. In the Power Apps Maker, find and click on Power Automate. Add 4 inputs here: request GID, amount, region, and type, so our flow knows exactly which request we're working on and what criteria to match. Next, let's fetch every approval process that matches those criteria. We'll add a Dataverse list rows action, select the approval process flow, and either use an OData query expression like this or a fetch XML expression like this to grab only the process definitions that apply to this request. If you're not sure how to build these queries, don't worry for now. We'll cover them in a separate video soon. Afterwards, add another list rows action for the approval steps table and filter it to list all steps where the approval request value matches request GUID. Now that we have the desired steps and the existing steps, we want to transform them into symbol ID lists so we can compare them. Add 2 data operations select actions, one pulling each process is good from the approval process table, the other pulling the process good from the approval process lookup field in the approval steps table. Next, we add 2 parallel actions. The first uses filter array to find IDs in the desired list that aren't in the existing steps. For each of these IDs, we'll add the step to the approval steps table. Meanwhile, in the second action, we use filter array to find IDs in the existing list that don't exist in the desired list. For each of these IDs, we'll remove the record completely from the approval steps table. At this point, we have the process we need to dynamically generate exactly the set of approval steps each approval request needs. Now, let's head back to the Canvas app maker and link the submit button to the flow we just created. Type the name of your flow. You should see a suggestion pop up. Select it, enter a dot, and you'll see the run property of everything set up correctly. Be sure to include the 4 inputs inside the parentheses. Next, add another gallery in the third pane. In the items parameter, let's write a filter expression on the approval steps table to only show steps where the approval request equals the one selected in our first gallery. Then let's sort those items by step number. Finally, add a heading to this pane as well. And there you have it. Your app is now set up and dynamically generates the correct approval process for each request. In the next video, we'll dive into wiring the logic that picks the next pending step, fires off the approval card to that user, and loops back after each approval to move the process forward. Thanks for joining me in today's episode and taking the first step in building real-world use cases to revolutionize your company's processes. If this video helped you, click like, subscribe, and hit the bell, and I will see you next time.